Today on C103.
And Katrina listening to me chat about the Mercosur deal and the worry that people have about the beef farmers worried about cheaper Brazilian beef coming into this market, and some people are worried about the way that beef is raised and what hormones are used, antibiotics, etc. Katrina says on imported meats there should be traceability on all the packaging, so people will know exactly the country of origin when they decide to purchase a particular cut of meat. Some people will, of course, go for the cheaper option and really have no care for the Irish producer that goes through all of the rigorous rules. Unfortunately, that is just the way it is, says Katrina. And as well, because of if cheaper meat does end up on the market with a cost of living crisis, you can understand people will go for the cheaper deals if they're trying to feed a family, and we know how many families are struggling at the moment. Thank you for your WhatsApp, Katrina, to 0862 103 103. Now, I want to move to a different topic because the property market is said to have paused for breath after prices remained largely unchanged in the last few months. Now, while prices continue to rise, the rate of increases has softened. That's according to the latest My Home report. To chat about the local scene, I'm joined by Magella Galvin, DNG Galvin Estate Agents. Good morning to you, Magella.
Good morning, Patricia.
And a happy new year to you and the rest of the gang.
Very same to you.
Now, how did property prices perform across Cork last year when you're taking an overview of the full year?
Well, I suppose on average, Patricia, property prices increased by about 7%. That's all dependent on the property type and location. New builds, energy efficient homes were the best sellers.
Yeah, what type of properties are most in demand? People coming to you, what are they? Is it still the 3-bedroom semi?
It is, I suppose, the more affordable end of the market, energy rated, with, turnkey homes. And that's all down to, I suppose, people are just looking for move-in ready homes. They're looking for homes that, require no construction or anything. Quite simply because of the cost of construction is so high, Patricia.
Mm. And then talk to me about downsizing, or as some people like to call it, right-sizing. Some of the older population don't like the word downsizing. But anyway, is that particularly strong at the moment?
It is. We've seen in the last 2 years, a lot of people are considering that option. And it's a very practical, wise move, I suppose, Patricia, because people are living in homes that are no longer suiting their needs. They're too big. It's too much maintenance. It's very hard to get tradespeople. And so a lot of people are looking to, maybe move in near towns or villages. They're looking to, some people would be looking for a bungalow is very common. And I suppose just to move into a home that just requires overall low maintenance. You've others then who would like to, I suppose, free up some equity to help family members get on the property market.
Yeah, and I know whenever we talk about downsizing, and we would hear from some people who say, look, raised my family, I'm in a 4-bedroom house, I'm here on my own. It can be expensive, as you say, to maintain, but it can be expensive to heat as well if you're living in, a large house on your own. But time and time again, Magella, I hear from people saying, I'd love the idea of moving into a smaller property, but I want to remain close to or in around my own neighbourhood or in around, my town or village, wherever I've lived all my life. That's the biggest problem, isn't it? It's the availability of those smaller properties.
That is the challenge, Patricia. And I suppose, as I say, a lot of people do look for bungalows and they're just simply not there in the area. And I suppose I know up the country there was a retirement village built, but there's not a lot of those in Ireland. We're way behind countries like America. And it's just finding that availability. And then, of course, a lot of people thinking of downsizing or right-sizing, don't want to put their property in the market until they found another one, which is perfectly understandable because obviously they fear that they'll be homeless, they'll have nowhere to go. Yeah. But it's a catch-22 then, because if they want to put an offer on a property, they can't really do so if their own isn't on the market.
But there's a bridging loan. Didn't that get announced just before Christmas?
Absolutely. There's talks of a bridging loan coming to, I think, the market in 2026. So it will be interesting to see how that will perform. I know that there's a 7% interest charge on that. So, but it may be a good short-term link for people thinking of downsizing, just to give them that security. But I suppose my overall opinion would be that if you are thinking about downsizing, you start preparing now. You know, you don't have to launch to the market straight away, but there's a lot of preparation goes into before you can launch to the market.
Such as?
So you get your valuation, so you know your budget, you've paperwork, a lot of legal paperwork to get in order, your title deeds, check your boundaries, you have to get a building energy rating certificate, so check in with your solicitor to make sure all this is in order as well.
So you would say have all of that done before you even start looking to see what properties are available for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's no harm in looking. I think we're all constantly looking in the property market, but you have to. I think buyers have to realise that they won't, if they're buying subject to selling their own property, they're not in a position to put an offer until their property is sale agreed. Really.
Yeah. What about first-time buyers, Majella? Are they still struggling to get on the property ladder?
Like first-time buyers have been very active in the market, and that's mainly due to the grants and incentives that the government have provided. But a lot, the cost of new builds has gone up so much, it's nearly counterproductive. So we're seeing them entering the second-hand market now as well. But it's a real struggle, Patricia,
Yeah, and then when you see a house, particularly a second-hand house, when you see it go up for sale and it's such and such a price, the asking price, but then what it eventually sells for can be way off what that asking price was.
Yes, 100%. And it's down to the fact that the market dictates the price, Patricia. We can all give an opinion on what the value is, but it's down to the buyers in the end of the day, what they're willing to pay for the property.
Yeah, and then landlords. We know landlords, particularly the one-off landlords and the people who became landlords and never planned to become a landlord. Many of them are leaving the market. You actually have a webinar coming up that's going to explain new regulations. Is this especially for landlords?
It is. So we've a webinar coming up the 22nd of January. It's a free webinar for landlords to just explain all the changes, because there's a lot of confusion over them. And I think we won't rightly see the impact until after March, obviously, till it's implemented. But, we are seeing more and more landlords leaving the market.
Can you understand why they're leaving, Majella?
I can. I mean, we're into 6-year rolling tenancies. If you have a small landlord and, somebody who wants to sell their property, they're into 6-year rolling tenancy. And unless they can prove some kind of hardship, they're going to have to sell with a tenant in situ, which will reduce the price by 20-30%. So reducing the value of their property.
And yet a 6-year rolling tenancy on the other side of that coin is so important to give security to people that are renting.
100%. And I think, it was made, these kind of things were thought out with the best intentions to protect tenants, but it's having the opposite effect. Like in the last quarter, the RTP reported 35% increase in landlords leaving the market. So, I mean, what's going to happen, unfortunately, is that the rental supply is going to reduce.
And it's already reducing, isn't it already done? I mean, because I know it's anyone who's listening to us who's in private rented accommodation, their dread is that they're going to get a phone call or an email or a letter in the post from the landlord saying, sorry, we need you to move out. Because it isn't. I mean, many years ago, a letter like that was fine. You could find another property to rent. Yes. But those properties are just not there.
They're not there, absolutely, Patricia. And it's the same going for the selling market. If you sold your house, you could find a property to rent in the interim, but they're not there anymore.
Okay, for people who maybe are thinking of selling, is this a good time of the year heading into the new year, or is there a best time of the year for selling your house?
Yeah, I'm often asked that question, Patricia, and I think, obviously, the spring is a great time to go to the market, but Nowadays, it's different. There really is no good or bad time to go to the market. It's active all year round. I suppose the advantage of going to the market now rather than later in the year is that there's little supply there now. It's likely that will improve later in the year. So, you've less competition now, so it is a good time.
And
but
houses...
it's also dependent on your property type. If you have your 3-bed semi in an estate, that's very active all year round. But if you're out in the country and you have a really nice garden, you may wait for the spring, to
when it looks really well
showcase that.
That certainly is good advice. But houses, as you say, particularly the 3-bedroom and semi in the towns or in the cities or whatever, they sell very quickly as well, don't they?
They do. They do, absolutely. And I suppose, one thing to note, and I think a lot of confusion around it, is like you'll see in the headlines property prices in Cork have increased by 15%, etc. But it doesn't paint the full picture, because what they're looking at is 3 to 4 bed semi-detached houses on average, and they are the high sellers, but they're not taking into account so much the rural property, that requires renovation, the detached house. They are more price sensitive.
Yeah. And how are the new builds going? Are you seeing more new builds?
I mean, there's definitely an increase in new builds. There's no doubt about that, but we're still nowhere near what's needed. I think last year we're talking about 34,000 houses being built, and we really need to double that.
Goodness me, it's tough. I mean, I really do feel sorry especially for those first-time buyers. I mean, how much of a deposit do people need to have saved before they even start to look at the market?
Well, they need a 10% deposit,
And what's the average house?
So you take the average house is 380, 390. So it's very tough for buyers out there. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and particularly if they are somebody who's renting at the same time, because we know that they're paying high rents as well. It's tough. All right, listen, hopefully it'll start to get a little bit better, but at least, as we said, it does look like it's paused for breath, because the rate of increases certainly has softened, which is good to hear. Majella, we leave it there. Pleasure as always. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye. That is Majella Galvin, and Majella is with DNG Galvin Estate Agents in Bandon.